Good evening, folks, and welcome once again to the Hour of the Time. This is the only hour that ever was or ever will be. This is the hour during which you are going to decide your future and thus our collective futures. I am your host, William Cooper. All over the United States in the last year and a half, the Food and Drug Administration has been moving against natural food supplements, vitamins, medical doctors who are exploring alternative health measures, people who attempt to treat themselves for illness using herbs. They have infringed upon the very basic privacy and rights of every citizen in this country. It is just one more move toward the police state. And tonight you're going to hear the story of a small clinic in the state of Washington, owned and operated by a reputable physician, well-trained, who had been in business for many, many years and had never had one complaint registered against him by any patient in his entire life. You are going to be outraged. You should have pencil and paper with you at all times during this broadcast so that you can write down the information, so that you can register your protest with the Food and Drug Administration and with the federal government and with your local authorities. Because it can happen at any time in your city, in your town, to your doctor, to your health food store, and yes, folks, even to you. Without further ado, we're going to get into the story of Dr. Wright. This show is to provide you with information to save this nation, save this country, and to make your life better. Tonight, I think you're going to be shocked at what has happened. And this comes from Dr. Julian Whitaker's Health and Healing. We have another one here, letters from listeners. And this one is unsigned, so I don't even know who it's from, but it's a letter sent in to us from a listener of this program about the same thing. And I have made many telephone calls about this, verified every bit of it. It's all true. It happened exactly like I'm going to tell you tonight. And I'm going to give you phone numbers, a couple of addresses, so that you too can verify that this has happened just exactly as I'm relating it to you. And then we're going to ask you to do something about it. That's right. We're going to ask you to be responsible and do something about it. The own government, in the personification of the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, is at war with all who espouse the use of any natural product to improve health. And that war has now turned violent. Only weeks after Time, Newsweek, and U.S. News and World Report all featured cover stories on the growing scientific validity of vitamin and mineral supplements and other forms of natural healing, the FDA, in an unbelievable display of vicious overkill, with guns drawn by accompanying cops, raids the offices of an internationally respected physician. His apparent crime? for none has been charged. No charges have been brought against him. Not on the day that he was raided with drawn guns or at any other time before or since. His apparent crime, he was using nutritional supplements with his patients. Folks, if the outlaw activities of the FDA and its most violent of all commissioners, David Kessler, get that name, write it down, David Kessler, are not stopped, you will very likely soon have to smuggle vitamin C in from Canada, or even worse, do without. I'm just using vitamin C as an example. All vitamins and minerals and natural health products. There will be no need for any newsletters on the subject, because everything except dangerous and expensive prescription drugs will be illegal. Illegal. Many of us have been watching the FDA inflict this brand of terror for years. And trust me, dear listeners, you have no idea what your government is doing. But it's time you found out. On May 6th, 1992, my birthday, only 10 minutes before the Tahoma Medical Clinic in Kent, Washington was to open for business, nearly 24 armed police and FDA agents in flak jackets busted down the door and stormed into the clinic with guns drawn. Marge Murphy, receptionist at this clinic for close to 5 years, was suddenly staring at a pistol pointed right in her face. The FDA agent, or King County policeman, screamed, quote, "Get your hands up! Get your hands up where I can see them right now!" Unquote. If Marge Murphy, out of panic, had tried to dive under the desk, would this man have blown her brains out? The Tahoma Medical Clinic is run by Jonathan Wright, M.D., an internationally respected physician. He received his BA degree from Harvard University and his MD degree from the University of Michigan. After postgraduate training in general practice and family medicine, he began his medical practice in Kent, Washington, specializing in nutritional approaches to disease. For 10 years, Dr. Wright wrote a monthly column for Prevention magazine, read by over 6 million people. And his book, Dr. Wright's Guide to Healing and Nutrition, has sold more than 150,000 copies. He has been in the same location in Washington State for roughly 20 years, treated over 10,000 patients from all over the world. And, dear listeners, he has never, ever had a complaint of any kind to any government agency. Can your doctor say the same? Patty Hoops has worked for Dr. Wright for 4 years. Shortly after the raid began, she called Dr. Wright's lawyer, George Cody. Cody asked to speak to the FDA agent in charge of the raid. An FDA agent came to the phone, slammed it down, and jerked the cord right out of the wall. He grabbed Patty Hoops by the arm hard enough, according to her, to produce bruises and exclaimed, quote, "No one is calling anyone until we get through here. We're in charge today," unquote. Patty Hoops has a heart condition and began having cardiac arrhythmias, and to this date she has not recovered. Jennifer Harrell, a new employee at the clinic, arrived just a few minutes after the raid began. An armed, flak-jacketed officer asked her name and what she did in the clinic. She stated that she would only give her name after she talked to a lawyer. The officer then said, quote, "If you want to be hard-nosed about this, sit your butt down on the sofa right now, and I can arrest you for obstructing justice," unquote. She was well within her rights And that stormtrooper knew it. The officer accusing Jennifer Harrell of being hard-nosed weighed over 200 pounds, had on a bulletproof vest, and wore a loaded weapon. A gun, pistol. Jennifer Harrell is 19 years old, weighs 110 pounds, and she now has recurring nightmares. Why was this peaceful medical clinic with a staff of about 15, mostly women, terrorized by the FDA? Let me ask that again. Why was this peaceful medical clinic with a staff of about 15, mostly women, terrorized by the FDA? Why, dear listeners, was the door busted down when normal business hours were to begin in only 10 minutes? They could have waited 10 minutes, walked right in the door, and presented whoever greeted them with a warrant. Wasn't done. Why wasn't it done? Because this was intended to be an act of terrorism to scare Dr. Wright's employees away from working for him and to scare Dr. Wright so that he would think twice about resuming his practice. Why were these health professionals herded at gunpoint into a single room and forced to stand in a circle, many crying, some too frightened to utter a sound? Was Jonathan Wright, MD, targeted by the FDA for heavy-duty viciousness, terrorism, to force him out of business? It is my conclusion that that is exactly what happened, and I will now tell you why. In July 1991, the FDA seized from Dr. Wright roughly 100 bottles of untainted tryptophan. Now, you may remember hearing something about this on the news. There was a tryptophan scare. Tryptophan is nothing more than an amino acid that has been taken by millions around the globe for various conditions such as sleep disorders and depression. In 1989, there was an outbreak of disease associated with tryptophan, which was quickly identified as a contaminant coming from a single manufacturer in Japan. Let me say this again. In 1989, there was an outbreak of disease associated with tryptophan, which was quickly identified as a contaminant coming from a single manufacturer in Japan. That problem, dear listeners, was resolved, and tryptophan should have been back on the market long ago. Long ago. As it is in the rest of the world, everywhere that is, except the United States. But in the United States, it is legal if it is used as an additive to livestock feed, which we then eat. Well, so you don't get confused, let me say it again. As an additive to livestock feed, which the livestock eats, and then we eat the livestock. Do you follow me? However, the FDA has kept tryptophan off the market for close to 3 years for no apparent reason for treatment of human beings. Dr. Wright's tryptophan had been tested at a prestigious medical institution and found to be safe. After the FDA seized it, Dr. Wright filed suit for the FDA to return the tryptophan. And there is the cause of all the trouble that followed. You see, Dr. Wright dared